Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey David, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I was out shopping today. There was lots of stuff in the stores, lots of people
Mm-hmm.
with masks on.
Yeah.
All the stores handing out sanitizer cloths to wipe your hands when you go in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, lots about 1 in 4 people, 1 in 5 people maybe had masks on. But the
Really?
good news is the stores were full, and I think we're pretty good um, at filling up those grocery stores, and I don't see that ending during this crisis. So, Bruce,
My
we're
son
here
even found
today.
some toilet paper the other day.
Oh, there was tons today at
Yeah.
where the stores I was at. There's no shortage of trees in Canada,
Well, no. You have
so
to
that
think
was
that
always
sooner or later that problem's going to resolve itself, but it's pretty
yeah.
crazy while it was happening.
And Bruce, I'm an optimist on this whole issue. I think that we're going to get through this, and it's going to there that the brightest minds in the world are working on this, working
Mm-hmm.
on both treatments and vaccines. And I'm not going to get into the specifics, but if you just go on Google and search for antiviral treatments for coronavirus, there's a number of things that are being looked at in a number of countries. Vaccine, same thing. That's further down the road. But I think I'm reading enough, and I have enough faith in our scientific community, brightest minds in the world, that I'm bullish on a NHL season, and of course, more than that, bullish on the whole world getting back in order sooner than later. So, and at the Cult of Hockey, that's how we are proceeding, Bruce. We are
We
proceeding as
might
if
as
there's going to
well.
be a playoffs. Might as well.
Season is still underway by last I could tell. I mean, it might be over, but it might not be over. It's kind of, I called it Schrodinger's season in my post today because it's, we won't know till we open the box.
What
What it
is the
was.
what is the Schrodinger's reference for those
Oh,
not familiar with?
Schrodinger's cat is a famous um, cat uh, devised by the imagination of the great mathematician Erwin Schrodinger, who uh, he used it as an explanation of probability that the cat was in a box where there was one molecule that was going to decay or not decay, and it was either going to kill the cat or not kill the cat. And so you have a box there, and the cat's either dead or alive, but you don't know which it is until you open the box. So it's Schrodinger's cat is sort of famous for, well, something's probably happened, we just don't know what it is, or something's going to happen, we don't know what it's going to be, and that's basically the NHL season. It could be over after 71 games, or they could be handing out the Stanley Cup in
Is the
September
is the
to
cat
the
dead or is
Oilers. I
the
mean, anything's possible, right?
Yeah, is the cat dead or alive? Was that
Yeah.
molecule crushed
Yeah. Was
or
it
was it active?
radioactive or was it
Yeah.
radioactive? Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just a thought experiment, but it was just one of those things where you know some of the information, but you don't know all of the information. So you're dealing with probabilities rather than certainties. So it's
Yes.
part of his, um, part of the probability theory of the 1930s.
Yes.
Oh,
Did you put a link to that? You better put a link to that. What the on your post
oh
there? What
okay.
what it means? That's all I'm saying. I don't know what percentage of our readers will know what you referenced there, but I'm guessing it's not 100%.
Oh, okay. Here I thought all of our readers were.
Well, I'll hold up my hand first and saying I needed
Oh,
you to
okay.
explain it. Okay.
Okay.
But no,
I
no,
just
everyone else
assume
can feel that now. You can.
I'll throw out references that not everybody's going to get, and I'm comfortable with that.
Fair
But
enough. But
sure.
now everyone else can hold up their hand without embarrassment.
Yeah.
Um, so the latest news, Bruce, is TSN came out with some news yesterday on the season, and in today's podcast we're gonna talk about that. We are going to talk about your latest post on the Oilers' newfound resiliency. And I have to tell you,
Hmm.
Bruce, with me digging into the power play and you digging into this, like every post I read, I'm more and more convinced that if there is a Stanley Cup playoffs, the Oilers are winning it. And I think this is what isolation and cabin fever does. I get more and more excited about the Edmonton Oilers the further that they are away.
Well,
And
we haven't lost a game for over a week now.
damn
Well, I guess
straight,
it is just a week, but yeah,
we're a jug.
still.
The Oilers are now a juggernaut. They haven't lost in a week. And I think this, not losing streak is going to continue for a few months. But I'm increasingly optimistic. Maybe because I've examined the best part of the Oilers team, which is the Oilers power play. We're going to talk about that. But you looked at the Oilers resiliency, so we're going to talk about that. But just quickly, the news, and most people have heard it on TSN. Various people were talking about players were getting together and talking about maybe starting training camp mid-July, season, like a few games at the end of the regular season, just to have everyone play an even number of games, essentially. And then start the playoffs, which will go August and September. And then they'd have, I think, a 3-week draft and trading free agency season, and then start the next regular season, which would be 82 games. And the thing that caught my mind, Bruce, is it's a lot of games in a short amount of time, first of all, but man, has the CBA changed everything. When you have revenue sharing and you have the players and the owners working together with the idea of maximizing revenues, suddenly it's the players who are sitting there getting their heads together thinking, how can we get as many, how can we save the season? And I'm not saying they wouldn't want to save it anyway because they want to compete, they want to play. Of course they would. But there is an absolutely massive economic incentive for players with short careers to play out those contracts and to get the most, because whatever the league-wide revenues are, there's escrow. And if it's suddenly, 50% of league revenues are realized, then escrow's, I think, 50%. They'll if they only meet half of their target, that's a huge issue for the players. So they all are working together to meet the target. And so one of the reasonings, Bruce, for waiting till August rather than pushing earlier is we have news today that an Ottawa senator has the virus, is that if you try to go too early and a player gets the disease, you'll have to cancel it. I don't see them going, Bruce, until actually, I don't think anything happens at all until a few things are fulfilled. Number one, there's a treatment where they do lower the death rate to something like the level of the regular flu, or even a really virulent flu like H1N1 that had double the death rate. Until that happens, I don't think anything happens for any of these leagues. But that could happen, where there's a viral treatment, and that could happen. What's your take on it?
Well, it seems that's a long gap. I mean, originally we were talking about a month, 6 weeks kind of thing. Picking it up in late July is 4 months from now, so it is it is time to turn things around. But as we've seen, every day we find out something something new and different about this thing. Some things positive, some things negative. There's certainly some apocalyptic interpretations out there of what's going to happen if we don't get a treatment or vaccine going or what have you. But I mean, there's no point in throwing up our hands and giving up hope. You just take in all the information and hope that the optimists are right. So here's hoping you're right. Here's hoping the NHL players are right, and they'll finish the season and start another 82-game season after 3 weeks off next November, and play until following July. I don't know how they'll possibly keep their bodies going through all that, but whatever variation of that there is it's encouraging that they're already thinking of possible solutions to keep the business thriving.
I think we're going to hear a lot about load management if they try to cram in that many games, and it will be common for players to miss games, regular scheduled rests during the season,
like basketball, eh?
So the depth of a team. And frankly, the Oilers have never been positioned like this in terms of depth. Now, who knows what will happen over the summer in terms of that issue. But man, they've got some players who can step in, like Tyler Benson's a hockey player, and Evan Bouchard's going to be ready for the NHL. So this could really, if depth is needed, and it's going to be needed in a season where players are playing so many games, that could work. The Oilers are set for it.
This year, for example, McDavid missed 7 games through injury and illness, but in our load management, it's the same math. In those games, the Oilers went 3-2-2, and if you have a team that you can do give a player a night off now and again, and it's commonplace in basketball, certainly in soccer. Not everybody plays every game, even baseball. that they get a day off where they're sitting with the reserves or whatever, and they might get in late in the game and they might not. But in hockey, it's more, are you on the bench or not? Um, but I could see that starting to happen, and especially in a situation like you say where everything's compressed over like two seasons worth of playoffs. That would be pretty wicked. So it would make a certain amount of sense. And if you can win something close to half your games when you're sitting out a star player, well, you can make it work. If you lose every time the guy's out, you can't do it. But I don't think the Oilers are there anymore.
Yeah, they survived Clefbaum being out. They
Mhm.
survived, you know, and they might expand the rosters. You could see that too in the NHL, where
Right.
suddenly you can carry three goalies, or you can have an extra player on your roster, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, it's all
Yeah.
speculation at this point. We're masters
Hmm.
of it, Bruce. We are masters. We are made for this moment. Masters of speculation.
Well, my guess is that the players will be more in favor of load management games off if they're getting paid for those games off than if they aren't. So I would dare say that if they're running the games now, the trick is, of course, people are paying for those games. They want to see the star players. But
Yeah, probably be
same
road
goes for
games. A lot
soccer
of
and basketball teams, right? So
yeah, yeah. I mean, Premier League has they have these huge rosters of players to meet all of their different tournaments and games and competitions. I mean, a team like Liverpool or Manchester United will have like essentially two full rosters of players who are high quality players, and they use half of them. Bruce, let's look at your post today. Excellent post, by the way. Good work,
thank you.
as always. It's a study of the Oilers' resiliency this year, and what hit me over the head, Bruce, was just the number, like the losing streaks this year
Yeah.
as compared to other years. So, what did you find out in terms of the Oilers' resiliency in terms of that and losing streaks?
Yeah, well, I went through, I mean, I was expecting the result I found, or most of the results that I found, just because I follow, this all season long, and I knew that the team had struggled to put together long winning streaks, but what they'd very successfully done is avoided losing streaks. And only once all season have the Oilers lost 3 games in a row. And they went on one foul little run there just before Christmas where they lost four, won one, and then lost the next two. So they won one out of seven, and that was in a time when the team was slumping a bit and a bunch of crap was happening. They only got 3 points out of those 7 games, but otherwise all season long, they've nipped every other 2 game losing streak in the bud with a win. So after a 2 game losing streak, they've won nine, lost one, and consistently. So you can pick out any 3 games out of the entire season, and other than that one 4 game slide, they won at least one of the 3 games, any three in a row that you pick. They've never, otherwise never lost 3 straight. So that's how you hang around in the standings, man. Is it, if you even if you lose two and win one, well, you got 2 points out of that week, right? And so you might drop a spot in the standings, but you're not falling off a cliff ever.
So, how
And
many, Bruce? How many losing streaks this year as
mhm,
compared to other years? Like, how many
yeah,
2 game plus losing streaks this year as
yeah.
compared to other years?
Well, I cut it off at 3 plus, um, as sort of being a significant
Okay.
slide. And I just looked at the McDavid era in 2015-16, his rookie year, and of course he missed half of it. They had 11 losing streaks of 3 or more games. And even in 2016-17, when they did make the playoffs and had an excellent season with 103 points, they had 6 losing streaks, 3 or more games. They had a 5 gamer, a 4 gamer, 4 3 game losing streaks that year. And then, of course, the last 2 years, they missed the playoffs. They had 7 long losing streaks in 17-18. In 18-19, they only had 5, but all of the 5 were at least 4 games, and 4 of those 5 were 5 games or 6 games. So, just one point they lost 11 out of 12, and at that point, all hope was lost on the season. Well, this year they've had 10 losing streaks of 1 game, where they won the next game, and that was that. 10 of 2 games, and then only one other losing streak all year. That was that one 4 gamer in mid-December. So they've done an exceptional job of cutting it off. So what I looked at was all the games where they won after losing two in a row, and out of those I cherry picked Several games where, sometimes they just went out and they blew out the other team, and that was that, right? They whipped New Jersey 4-0. They pounded Columbus 4-1. It wasn't particularly a challenging win, but 4 games of the 9 that they won, the Oilers trailed halfway through the game or later and had to come back to win it. And so I looked at the details of all those 4 games and saw how they pulled them out. Now with third period comebacks, typically 3-2, 3-2 wins where they were down 2-1 or even 2-0 in one case. One of them was against Washington Capitals early in the season when Washington pounded home 3 goals in the second period to take a 3-1 lead. The Oilers have been shut out the previous 2 games. It looked really bad. Ovechkin had a couple of goals. It looked like the Washington Stars were having their way. And then the Oilers came back in the third. Draisaitl scored. McDavid scored with goalie out to tie it up. Then McDavid and Draisaitl teamed up for the game winner in overtime. So that put the end to that slump. And then the other games were all against conference rivals, big games, and they won them all 3 of them, 3-2 in regulation. So in each case, they skunked Vancouver, Nashville, and Winnipeg, who are 1, 2, 3 in the wild card standings as we speak, and only a few points behind Edmonton. So winning in regulation was all that much more crucial. They got 2 points, and their rival got none in these games. And each time they were down 2-1 or 2-0. And each time it was Big Leon that was the driving force. He scored 2 goals in all 4 of these games that I highlighted in my post. Was the first star in all 4 of the games, and all 4 were like huge wins for the Oilers when their backs were against the wall a little bit. They were in a losing slide. They were down in the game. It was an uphill battle. And they were team efforts. The goalies came through. They kept the team in the game, or they made the saves when it was tied, or when they finally got ahead. The checkers checked. The penalty killers penalty killed. To riff off an old Glenn Sather shtick, but the big guys came through and scored. McDavid as well. Like he had 8 points in these 4 games. Draisaitl 10. But it was especially Leon that was, he was the first star of all 4 of those games. So his MVP credentials, people look at the numbers, and, these guys at Evolving Wild have been looking at his overall numbers and criticizing, but, the numbers don't tell the whole story. Well, let's start with that. It's a story. There's a narrative to what happens during his season. It's not just about points and goals and stuff. I mean that's certainly a big contributing part of it. But when you look at when they name the MVP, they don't just say numbers. They say this is what this guy did for his team. This is how he came through. Here's a big moment in a game where he came through it. And Leon's built a pretty compelling narrative this year of coming through in the clutch in big games and important games for the Oilers. So when you put those collection of little narratives together with the big one that is his 110 points when nobody else has reached 100, I think it's a strong case. Even as there are warts on the season as a whole, man, there are a lot of games where he was the difference maker.
First, it's a huge feather in his cap. This evidence you've dug out, his play in these big games. And, people who put a lot of stock in the on-ice numbers, just tons of false positive and negatives in the on-ice numbers. If you actually dig into his contributions to goals and scoring chances, he was the best Oiler on the team. So I don't, people can make the arguments about plus-minus numbers. Well, I think people should be skeptical about, people are skeptical about goals plus minus, official goals plus minus. Well, it's based on the same essential theory as the other on-ice numbers. It's a plus and a minus on goals as opposed to shots, or shots at net as Corsi, but they all have lots of false positive and negatives. And be careful. If you put a lot of weight in that, you're gonna make a statement like Valeri Nichushkin was its comparable player this year to Leon Draisaitl. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, well, and I'm just going to go back to the narrative thing. I mean, because that is how, the writers, not statisticians, right, that pick the Hart Trophy winner.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's bear that in mind. But I mean, it is all about the narrative. I mean, Taylor Hall, the year he won the MVP, it was all about him picking up a lame New Jersey team by the bootstraps and willing them into eighth place. And it's a compelling narrative, and it won him the heart.
And it was about
Well,
Peter Chiarelli's terrible
mm,
trade too, which was mentioned
well,
every
yeah,
second ref.
that happened too. But yeah, I mean, I also went through the games, and this was a little bit more cherry picking, but important games that weren't necessarily off of two-game losing streaks or or whatever, but they were tough games where the Oilers typically came from behind or had to rise against the tide to pull out the win. And basically 3-2, 4-3 kind of games against again Vancouver, Nashville, St. Louis, important games against key rivals or top teams. And again, in one after another of these close, hard-fought wins, where Draisaitl did his job of being, contributing the big goal or the big play at the key time, and everybody else did their job, and the team found a way to win. And these are games they would have lost many past years, many past years. That certainly all the time we've been blogging about the team. Other than the one playoff year, obviously they found a way to lose more games than they won every other year, and this year they've got that turned around, and it's a lot of it is just this ability to come through in gut check time and pull out these key games.
Alrighty. Bruce, I'm still working on the power play issue.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I want to go back to something. I started out the whole series. One of the things I was looking at is why was the Oilers' power play so crappy before the McDavid era and the
Mm-hmm.
first year of the McDavid era? And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I noted was like I thought that Taylor Hall, they just always failed to get Taylor Hall on the right spot to shoot. Like
Yeah.
Ryan Nugent Hopkins was on the right half wall. That was Hall's best spot. I still hold to that, but I was confronted with some kind of compelling evidence. My idea was that Taylor Hall is a really good shooter, and
Mm-hmm.
that if you only set him up there consistently, he would have scored a lot more. It's hard for me not to believe that. It's so firmly lodged in my head that that's my narrative on that. But
Yep.
Kerry L. Kettle, who is on Twitter at Kerry L. Kettle, he's one of the most sober and rational and calm
Mm-hmm.
Oilers commentators you're going to find. He hit me with some stats, and I'll just throw these out at you. And
Sure.
it made me rethink my thought on Hall as a shooter. He's obviously a
Okay.
great point producer,
Yeah.
can be if he's healthy. Here's what Kerry Kettle said. I disagree with your assessment of Hall as a shooter. He is a mediocre shooter at best and scores with quantity, not quality of shots. Consider this. Of the 433 NHL forwards with 200 plus games since 2013, Hall ranks 271st in shooting percentage, 9.8 percentage, tied with Jay Beagle and Kyle Brodziak. It's those two names, which now there might be some good players also in that range. Like Kerry did a good job of picking
Yeah.
the two, like in terms of narrative, he did a very good job of picking narrative, like Jay Beagle and Kyle Brodziak. So, but he is only he
Mm-hmm.
has Kerry 271st out of 433. Like I don't
Uh-huh.
know what Draisaitl is, like a real sniper, like Leon in the last 3 years.
He's been over 20% the
Yeah,
last 2 years running,
he's
so he'd be
probably
way up
first.
there. He's way
So
up
that
there,
was
for sure.
okay. So I put a lot of weight, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of statistical analysis that's hard to argue against. But he continued. Hall's shot is not and has never been a real threat. Hall does his damage on the rush, not one timers. For comparison, here's Hall's shooting percentage since 2013 again. Hall 9.8%, Zach Cassian 11.8%, RNH 11.9%, Chason 12.6%, Eberle 13.1%, McDavid 15%, Draisaitl 16.9%.
Yeah.
So like my whole argument on the power play is this power play became good when the whole focus became on unleashing McDavid and Draisaitl as shooters on the power play and figuring out a way to accommodate them both, because both of them, their natural spot is the right half wall, and the Oilers found a way eventually to accommodate both and set up both and get the most out of both on the power play. And I was thinking, well, if they only done the same with Hall, now they never did that with Hall, but Carey's evidence of Hall not being maybe the kind of shooter that I was thinking he was is kind of compelling.
Well,
What do you
Hall
say?
was he's a hard shooter and a bit of a scattergun in my experience. Like every once in a while, he picked the top corner, and you go, "Holy moly, that was unstoppable! What a shooter!" But then he'd fire one over the. I mean, and these are only shots on goal, of course, that they're calculating shooting percentage. But yes, a volume shooter. Yes, good off the rush, which doesn't really translate well to power play. Um, Scoring. Not many power play goals are scored on the rush, some, but I would say a much lower percentage than other aspects of the game. Um, and you yourself embedded in that fine post you wrote, the 2,152 word post that read like one of mine. That one had
I did the full McCurdy on that one.
you had some great evidence in there of Hull's power play points season by season, and he
Yeah.
only really had one MVP season where he ripped it up on the power play, and all the other years he was sort of quite mediocre, for a first unit guy, 15 to 20 point range, 10 to 20 point range. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I was surprised, frankly, at how low they were, knowing that he was had pretty good outputs of point scoring in those years. I just would have thought more of those points would have come on the power play, but it suggested to me that he was anything but a specialist at the 5-on-4 game.
Bruce, I think it highlights how little you and I and the whole kind of people who dig into stats, how little we look at power play numbers in a way. Like the fact that we didn't know that, it's a little bit surprising to me that wasn't something we know about Taylor Hall. And in terms of like signing him this summer, I was thinking about like there's been talk of the Oilers bringing him back. Of course,
Right.
he's a tremendous player and
Talk,
everything
talk,
else.
talk, 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 talk,
Yeah,
talk, talk.
but
Yeah.
where if you're going to pay him to be a
Yeah.
first line player, where
Uh-huh.
does he
11
fit on the
million.
Oilers power play? Listen, he
Well,
doesn't. He doesn't is the truth. On the top power play and on this power play, there's no so you're getting this. I haven't looked at his even strength scoring numbers over the same time period from 2013. I bet you they're pretty darn good. Bet you
hmm,
Taylor Hall's uh, uh, you know top at least top 30. I'm gonna guess even strength attacker in the NHL since 2013.
mm-hmm.
But I don't see the fit on the Oilers in terms of the amount of money he's going to command and the fact that the power play is full up. Because if you were only paying him to be like this great even strength player, that would be fantastic. But you have to pay him more than that. You have to give him that money that goes to the top power play guys as well. So, and with the Oilers cap crunch, with all of these players to sign, I don't know. I have a hard time making sense of ever Taylor Hall playing again for the Edmonton Oilers in the salary cap era. Unless he's just
Well,
willing to take the biggest haircut on his salary on a really short-term deal. Whew, I don't
yeah.
know.
And you want to move out the Nuge to make room for him? I'm not
Oh
sure I do.
no,
Yeah.
no,
I mean,
no, I
now
don't.
that he's found his own home on the left wing, I'm not sure how much of an upgrade that would be.
Yeah,
And uh, I had some knowledge of Hall's power play numbers well with the Oilers, but what I hadn't realized was that how poor they'd been as a devil, other than that one year, which obviously was the year that had everybody studying him. And this past couple of years, that's kind of gone away. Uh, so the power play numbers of the Oilers themselves, like I could have told you in a New York minute that Draisaitl's had double-digit power play goals in 3 of the last 4 years, for example. And that's excellent production for a goal scorer. But uh, it, you're right that a top line player has to fit in on the top power play unit. When you're talking about the big money guys, and I'm not sure where that spot is on Edmonton's unit. They have on the 1-3-1, the three is amply filled with excellent players.
and if they
So
need
Hall's
another
not a
skill
net
player,
front. He's not a point
yeah,
man.
Yamamoto. If they needed another skill guy, I mean Yamamoto is the right shot guy who could play the left wall,
Hmm.
right? Like that's the next most logical thing. So the other thing, Bruce, I think I got in a little bit into the shooting numbers when we were talking last about the Oilers power play. But again, what really hit me over the head is again what transformed the Oilers power play more than anything else was finding the getting the right players in the right spots on the ice so they could get off their shots and having other players not shoot so much. And I think a hallmark
Yeah.
of the Todd McClellan era was the shoot, shoot, shoot philosophy. They really believed, and I could be maybe I'm gaslighting the McClellan era, but I can just remember lots of conversation from McClellan and the other coaches about we got to get shots on net on the power play. Like within 10 seconds of a face-off, we have to have a shot. We got to get a shot, and it all flows from the shot. Get that shot on net. It breaks down the formation,
Yeah.
and good things happen after the shot.
Hmm.
Bruce, I don't think I'm making that up. Do you remember hearing that?
Yes. Funnel
Okay.
pucks to the net. Oh yeah.
Okay. So that strategy
Better
though,
get that shin pad assassin firing away in there, right?
that strategy was probably the exact wrong strategy. When you look at the numbers, that's what I'm saying. Now they had the one good outlier year, 2016-17 year, but the four other years of the McClellan era, leading into the Hitchcock era, they didn't have good power plays. And what you saw in those years was McDavid not shooting enough, and
Yep.
Clefbaum and Sekera shooting too much. So and Draisaitl not shooting enough. So I'll just go quickly through the shot totals through those years. In the first year of the McClellan era, when they had a mediocre power play, McDavid had 8.1 shots at net. Draisaitl had 6.9 shots at net. Sekera 14.3. This is per 60. Excuse me. So McDavid 8.1 shots per 60 power play minutes. Draisaitl 6.9. Sekera 14.3. He was
Oh,
drastically outshooting McDavid and Draisaitl on the power play that year. Andre Sekera. Okay, we go to the next year, 2016-17. Sekera, he put 11.9 shots at net per 60. Clefbaum, 12 shots per 60. McDavid was at 8.4. Now, Draisaitl had a big year on the power play that year. He got up to 13. So that's why I think that was one of the successes of that power play is Draisaitl was shooting more and scoring more. The next year, though, Clefbaum, they really doubled down on that point shooting. Clefbaum gets 16.8 shots per 60. 16.8. McDavid's at 8.9 per 60. Draisaitl drops to 11.4 per 60. So Clefbaum again is the mad bomber on the power play. Like the whole focus of the power
hmm.
play, or one of the player most likely to shoot. The big focus is let's get Oscar Clefbaum to drive that puck at net and go from there. And again, that was a 31st worst. That was the 31st ranked power play in the NHL. It was a terrible power play. And I remember hearing that year specifically, like, let's get shots at net. Let's get shots at net from the point. Let's put that puck at net. All right. Now we go to the better power plays of the last couple of years. So McDavid's shots at net has gone from 8 or 9 shots at net. So 2018-19, it was 13.7. And last year, it was 13.7. So he's taken about 4 or 5 more shots per 60 on the power play. Draisaitl, he's up to he goes from 11.4 per 60 to 15.1 and 13.7. So they're getting, and Clefbaum, he drops from 16.8 per 60 to 10.0, and this past year 8.8 per 60.
Good.
So, and this is what you and I saw, I think, is in
Hmm.
Clefbaum, he became a master of moving the puck to the right half wall, to the left half wall,
Yeah.
keeping the puck in the zone, moving the puck quickly to the guys who should be shooting the puck. So they moved away from that shoot, shoot, shoot from the point to let's actually figure out who our best shooters are and do
Yeah.
everything we can to set them up in their choice shooting spots.
Yeah,
Excellent
I
work,
don't, I don't know
Glenn
about
Gulletson.
you. I'd rather see Oscar Klefbom passing the puck than shooting it. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, me too.
I mean, we all remember that 100-mile-an-hour heater he put past Martin Jones at tie game 5 in 2017. But that's, the exception to the rule of, uh, he doesn't generally overpower goalies. And, I think he has to shoot sometimes just to keep them honest, right?
Yeah.
Just like a fastball pitcher has to throw, the odd slider in there just to keep the batter on his heels a little bit. But his priority is pass, pass, pass. And, pass to Connor, pass to Leon, pass to Nuge. Okay, now I can shoot one. And that's,
And yeah, and that became his focus too. Like I think in terms of his own mindset on the power play, he changed from thinking of himself as a shooter
mhm,
to a passer. And I think that
yep,
really, I mean, his passing ability this year, I just noticed so many passes right in the wheelhouse of the guy getting the pass, either Nugent Hopkins or Draisaitl or McDavid. He was putting the puck perfectly right where they needed it, right when they needed it, and moving it quickly. And I give Oscar Klefbom all the credit in the world for this power play.
yeah.
I know there was talk through the year of moving him off, and I might have suggested that earlier in the year. As
Hmm.
this year went on, though, I just my respect and admiration for his work on the power play shot through the roof because I could see what he was doing, and it was working.
Puck was going through him, and he was moving it to the open guy, and he was making good decisions as to which open guy. He had good choices, had good options, and that's what you want. We talked about this last podcast about the point guard is that much more dangerous when he has two or three different offensive weapons that he can distribute the ball to rather than one main guy that everybody's watching. But he is, um, yeah, those passes are on the money 9 times out of 10, and he's, he'll overload it on one side a couple times, and he might pass to Nuge and go back to Oscar and back to Nuge and back to Oscar, and on the other side, you have Leon, who instead of getting impatient and wanting the puck, he's now saying, okay, now they've got the other guys occupied over there. Now is my time to sneak into the top of the circle and see if we can get pass through. And they've really kind of unleashed, I think, the offensive weaponry across that power play very well. And as you say, Glenn Gulitson is the coach in charge of that. So credit where due. They really turned it around.
Alrighty. So Maddie's giving me heck on Twitter for dreaming that the Oilers might win the cup. Maddie tweets at me, "What are you smoking while staying at home and working and ruminating on the Oilers win the Stanley Cup?" Question mark. Because I tweeted out the more what I was saying on the podcast earlier that I'm getting optimistic. I also in my tweet said cabin fever setting in? Question mark. Sure. So yeah, I know that I'm a little bit overly optimistic here, but why not? Why not dare to dream? Have some fun.
Dreams are what we got at this moment, David. We can have
Indeed,
our we
Bruce.
can have our dreams, or we can have our waking nightmare. We've got plenty. We've got plenty of that throughout the day, so we might as well harbor a few secret dreams or not so secret, I guess. That there are better days ahead. I mean, we got to hang our hat on something.
Hey, I think it's wide open, the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's, these teams are all going to come back. They're going to be off. It's the players who are taking best care of themselves in the summer here
Hmm.
and are finding a way to work out. It's not going to be easy for them to work out, but we know Connor McDavid's going to find a way. He's got, I'm sure, a hyperbaric chamber locked away somewhere that he can do his magic in. No, I'm serious about McDavid. Like he's the kind of guy, the kind of fanatic who's going to be finding a way to work out like crazy. I'm sure all summer long. And when these teams come back, it's going to be the balance will be shifted again in the NHL. And this Oilers team, Bruce, if they can get goaltending, are they the favorite to win the Stanley Cup? Of course not. But
No,
could they get to the Stanley Cup final? Oh yeah, they could get to the Stanley Cup final. If Koskinen or Smith or both of them get really hot, we've seen that in the past. I mean, they have the two best players in the NHL,
so I was just going
Bruce.
to say. I mean, when you stack up your playoff odds at the beginning of the playoffs, what other rosters can you look at and have two players the caliber of 97 and 29? There's
Yeah, and if
none.
they start
I mean,
calling some
there's
penalties,
other deeper teams that have a lot of good players, but just the upper, high end players. I'd stack the Oilers up against anyone.
yeah. Now goaltending's it's it's a roll of the dice. Who knows? But the
Three meter
Oilers
man.
goalies were good this year. Generally speaking, they were okay. I would say they outplayed the opposition goalies, in more than half the games. That the Oilers goalies were better than the opposition goalies in more than half the games this year, and it might have been as high as 60%. So good for the Oilers goalies. We came in with lots of questions about Koskinen and
Yep.
Smith,
Yep.
and I was completely content with the answer that we got. They weren't the best goalies in the NHL, but they were far from the mediocre goaltending that we'd seen in previous years here. So, Bruce, we're gonna post this podcast right away on your new
Okay.
post, and I'll have a new post tonight on the playoffs. Our intention, we've been working out our schedule, is to post every night one post, so there'll be something fresh at the Cult of Hockey every day.
Mhm.
You're going to start your season in a review of players.
Yep.
I'm going to keep picking away at the Oilers, different aspects of the Oilers team.
Yep.
So we will have one fresh post, and we're hoping to post kind of at midnight. So it'll be there for the early morning crowd
Right
as
on.
you get up to whatever your day holds for you. You know, if you need a little break, just come to the blog, and we'll have something there on the Oilers. Looking forward to
Just like any
Stanley
off
Cup
season.
games. Just like
Every
it.
off season, and some of them have been the full 6 months, as you know. But our objective has always been one post a day at minimum, whether, it's player reviews, prospects, draft talk. I mean, all those things are still relevant, assuming the game itself is. And so it's just the off season started about 3 weeks early, and we don't know for sure that this season is still on suspended status, not over. So who knows when they might get back to playing games. But in the meantime, we just have to approach it like we do an off season, and do our reviews, go through it player by player, look at some of the team aspects, uh, and the roster construction, and all those kind of details. But it's to some extent business as usual, other than there's no playoffs going on while we're already looking back at a failed season. We're actually looking back at a pretty successful season. There's some real progress for us to contemplate that the Oilers have seen under Ken Holland and Dave Tippett and Glenn Gulitson and the rest. Uh, there really are positive signs in the right direction that will make some of these columns a little more fun to read, or to write and to read for people, even as we're in suspended animation, as it were.
Indeed. Well, Bruce, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to talk about hockey with you and with people, anybody who's interested in the subject. I could talk about hockey a long time.
No one would have guessed
So,
that.
yeah, anyways, we've got lots more to come. And thanks for listening and for reading, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.